You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And we've got a lot of surprises for you today. For one thing, I have only one guest in this episode, and that's because the subject we'll be discussing is so crucial. It's a free press. And what's wrong with journalism today, what's right with it, and how you and I, as users of journalism, readers who thrive on it, who need news, who need a free press, how we can affect both what's wrong and how we can strengthen what's right. And my guest is Margaret Sullivan of the Washington Post. We also have an extended Surrealism Corner because, well, things are getting more and more surreal, every day. But before we do any of that, we need to go inside the headlines. Might as well start big with what really is the most important story in the world that nobody's paying attention to. A crack in an Antarctic ice shelf grew 17 miles in the past 2 months. It's Antarctica's fourth largest ice shelf, and it's getting close to a full break in an area already vulnerable to warming global temperatures. Since December, the crack has grown by the length of about 5 football fields each day. Well, now that I've got your attention, back to nationalism, I fear. The Duma, the Russian parliament, has voted 380-3 to decriminalize domestic violence in cases where it does not cause, quote, substantial bodily harm, and does not occur more than once a year. The move treats a first conviction for domestic battery as an administrative offense with a $500 fine or 15 days in jail. But only injuries like concussions or broken bones would lead to such so-called punitive measures. The bill is now with the rubber stamp upper chamber, where no opposition is expected, and then is expected to be signed into law by Putin, who has signaled his support. Well, feminists have always said, as it is in the family, so it is in the state. It's time to return to the United States. Since Trump's tweet attacks and condemnatory comments against the federal judges who checked his executive order banning Muslims and immigrants from the U.S., the issue of judiciary independence as a third, co-equal branch of government has risen to the front and center of news. This shed heat, if not light, on Neil Gorsuch, Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court. Now, I took on that nomination in some detail last week, so there are only 3 updates I want to add now. 2 are from the past. In his high school yearbook, it seems that Gorsuch was listed as the founder of the Fascist Club, which today is dismissed as a joke. Well, high school, perhaps it was a joke, if an unfunny one. But then, in 1987, when a student at Columbia, while the undergraduates were debating fraternity systems' treatment of women and of men of color, Gorsuch co-wrote a piece defending the all-male, all-white clubs. He employed the usual rhetoric, appropriating free speech and pluralism as excuses for exclusion, and he mocked demonstrators as paid professional protesters. This was not only untrue, but especially interesting, since Gorsuch himself had co-founded the Federalist paper. It was a publication there, a student publication, which did accept funding from the right-wing Heritage Foundation. These days, Gorsuch is trying to thread the needle through which he can enter the lifetime kingdom of the court via excessive niceness and politeness to senators, and by trying to have it both ways, critiquing Trump's attacks on the judiciary as being, in Gorsuch's words, demoralizing and disheartening, but making that critique in private. The strategy would be to seem centrist and fair so that senators and some citizens opposed to his nomination will cave, thinking, well, this is probably the best that they can hope for. For those people, I refer you back to last week's Fighting Words, the hot seat, about the stolen SCOTUS seat. It takes a while for resistance protests to filter up to major corporations, but companies that depend on retail sales need to be much more sensitive and swift to resistance pressure. After customer complaints about Kawasaki USA's sponsorship of an episode of The Celebrity Apprentice, the company said it would not sponsor the show again so long as Trump is an executive producer. The #GrabYourWallet campaign has targeted more than 60 companies, including Trump's golf courses and hotels and any others that sell Trump-branded goods. By now, we all know that Nordstrom dropped Ivanka's accessory and clothing line, not attributing it to protests, mind you, although Sharon Coulter of Grab Your Wallet noted that over 230,000 tweets and who knows how many millions of dollars worth of missed purchases later, they heard us. So did Trump, who shattered whatever traditions he hadn't already broken by taking to Twitter to denounce Nordstrom, and to do so not only on his personal Twitter account, but, oh my God, on the official White House POTUS account. Expectably, this has triggered an uproar over more ethics and legal violations than I have time to list here. Meanwhile, Neiman Marcus has stopped selling Ivanka's jewelry and accessories, but hey, Macy's and Bloomingdale's are still selling her clothing. And a red alert that didn't get as much attention as it should have was when Trump, speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, Jefferson and Madison would have been livid at the existence of such an event. Well, it was at that event that Trump vowed to, quote, totally destroy the 60-year-old law that bans tax-exempt churches from actively supporting political candidates. Trump wants to overturn this law, the Johnson Amendment, although most Americans, including most clergy members, say they do not want places of worship embroiled in partisan politics. Nearly 80% of Americans say it is inappropriate for pastors to endorse a candidate in church, and 75% say churches should not make endorsements. This, according to an evangelical polling group in Nashville, Lifeway Research. Furthermore, 80% of pastors say they should not make political endorsements from the pulpit, according to a 2012 Lifeway survey of evangelical and mainline Protestant churches. The Trumpist attack on the Johnson Amendment is actually a full frontal assault on the Constitution's insistence on separation of church and state. This last item, well, it ruled the headlines, and justly so, when the entire Republican Senate caucus backed their majority leader in formally silencing Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. This was during the debate on confirming Jeff Sessions for Attorney General, and Warren, opposing his nomination, was reading a 1986 letter from Coretta Scott King criticizing Sessions for lifelong racist activism. Keep in mind this is Black History Month. Mitch McConnell, deciding to selectively enforce an arcane rule about Senate manners, stepped in it big time when he said, well, quote, she was warned, she was given an explanation, nevertheless she persisted, period, close quote. He then called for her to sit down and be silent throughout the entire debate, and the Republican-controlled Senate backed him up without one person standing up in rebellion. Oh, wow. Of course, Warren went on Twitter and Facebook immediately and read the letter to the world. Of course, within an hour or so, the phrase, nevertheless she persisted, became a trending hashtag on Twitter. Of course, by the next day, 4 male Democratic senators, Udall of New Mexico, Sherrod Brown of Ohio, Sanders of Vermont, and Merkley of Oregon, all read into the record parts of the Coretta Scott King letter in support of both Warren and Mrs. King. And of course, here's the best part. Women gathered outside McConnell's D.C. home Wednesday and Thursday nights to read the letter aloud by bullhorn all night long. It reminds me of a quote. Too many women in too many countries speak the same language of silence. That was said by a former senator. Her name was Hillary Rodham Clinton. It's time for a break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll return in just a moment with my guest, this week a solo guest, because the issue is so important and hers is such a clear and vital voice on it. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. And now for my guest. Margaret Sullivan is an American journalist who's the media columnist for the Washington Post. She's the former public editor of the New York Times, serving as the reader's representative and reporting directly to Arthur Sulzberger, Jr. She was the newspaper's fifth public editor, or ombudswoman, and she was the first woman to ever hold the post. She began her tenure at the Times on September 1, 2012, coming there from the Buffalo News, where she was editor and vice president. She has been a crusading voice on behalf of, in defense of, and in critique of the press and our need for a free press, particularly now. Welcome back to the program, Margaret.
Thank you, Robin. Wonderful to be with you.
Well, you did the show back when you were the ombudswoman, the public editor for the New York Times, and I was a fan of your work even then. And now you are, of course, the media columnist for the Washington Post. And I have to say, I want to be you when I grow up. I have a print crush on you and your work. Who else? I mean, really, seriously, who else says things like, "Dear media, the Trump White House has total contempt for you. Time to react accordingly." Or some of those, you said, let's stop using fake news because they've now appropriated the term. Let's call a lie, a hoax a hoax. It is a really bracing thing to read your column, and I hope that journalists more and more are doing so.
Well, thank you very much. I have been trying to be at least clear. And it's a very strange time in our country. So it's a target-rich environment. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, the murk is everywhere, murkiness. So clarity is not just a small thing. Clarity, in fact, is the thing. And of course, journalists and I don't even blame journalists so much. Some commentators, yes. But the suits, I think, certainly in the electronic broadcasting world, sat on their heads during the campaign, and they let their heads be sat upon. So it was not surprising to me that the first area to wake up and say, oh my God, what is happening, was print media, notably the Washington Post and the New York Times.
I'm actually it's thrilling to be at the Washington Post right now because there's a lot of good journalism being done here, and that was true during the campaign as well. One of the things that was so notable is that the Post managed to put a book together called Trump Revealed during the campaign. And also, David Farenthold, the terrific investigative reporter,
he was wonderful.
Has done such great work, and really used the new methods of kind of crowdsourcing and using social media, and was really inventing a new form as he went along. But it's been nevertheless a very challenging time. I mean, one thing I would say is that I think that at least the print media or the print-based media, and with that I would include places like, BuzzFeed and Politico, which kind of grew out of this tradition. I really do think they told the public who the candidates were. Whether they were listening or whether people were truly listening or not, I don't know. But I do think the information was out there.
Yes, I think it was out to the extent that it was out there at all. It was out there from the print media.
One of the great mistakes, and I do think it's been acknowledged now, is that during the primary, Trump was given so much free airtime.
Yes.
And it really was, I don't know that this part was ever acknowledged, but I think fairly clearly it was because he does drive ratings. He has called himself a ratings machine.
That's right.
And, he knows how to work the TV audience. He comes by it through his life as a reality TV star.
Yeah.
So, CNN, which also, I think particularly now has done a lot of good journalism, but during the primary, they were really just letting his rallies and conferences just be broadcast out there unfiltered.
That's right.
And at great length.
For
and
hours.
even to the point of filming his or broadcasting the empty podium waiting for him to come. I mean,
yes,
the New York Times did a study and said that he had received something like $2 billion in free
airtime
exposure.
That's right.
Yeah, not just from CNN, but throughout that world, and that undoubtedly helped him a great deal.
Of course it did. Of course. Well, from now going forward, among your advices, your wonderful spine-stiffening advice to media, or specifically to because I'm now making a differentiation between media and press.
I think that's very interesting. I think that's really worthwhile because media is so hard to pin down. What are we talking about after all?
Exactly. Well, it was my son, Blake Morgan, who pointed that out to me, and I am in his debt. But among the things you've said is emphasize the watchdog role in getting back the trust of the public. Be scrupulously fair but relentlessly tough. Represent the interests of all citizens, and I love this one: scrutinize, don't normalize. Expand, please.
Well, as we know, the journalism, the press, whatever we want to call it, has gone down sharply in the public's estimation.
Yes.
The citizens don't really have much trust in, the news media anymore. But one thing that citizens, voters, regular folks, still want from their journalists is this watchdog role, and they believe that they get it too. Interestingly, 3 of 4 people who responded to a big Pew Research poll said that they do think that journalists are able to hold public officials accountable. So that's something they value, they think is happening, and they want to continue. So I think that's the main way forward for us at a very difficult time, is to stress and emphasize this accountability role. And the other thing that people want is they want false claims to be called out. If somebody is lying or saying wrong things or making bogus claims, they want it known. And so those are 2 clear messages that come from people, news consumers, to us, and I think we need to listen to that.
Right. And also, I think we saw them put their money where their mouth is, or their hopes are, when scores of people began to, when Trump's war on the media began, and has escalated, of course, now calling reporters scum, saying that the press is the enemy, that it's the opposition party, and Bannon saying we should just shut up. So, when that began, though, that's when there was this uptick in people suddenly subscribing to the Times and the Post and going online and seeking them out and getting digital editions, getting print editions. And there's a hunger out there, I think, that is real.
There is, and it's, the Times remarkably has reported that they have something like 200,000 new digital subscribers over the past few months, which is really remarkable. The Post has also had a big increase, and places like ProPublica and other nonprofits who do this work have found a lot of public support. So while there's a lot of media bashing and certainly a lot of trolling and a lot of criticism, there also is an appreciation. So I think we have to buckle down and do our jobs as best we can, and we need to remember that there really is a mission attached to our role as journalists, and the mission is to hold public officials accountable and serve as the public's eyes and ears. So if we can concentrate on that, I think it may bring us through.
Yes, wasn't it Jefferson who said, if I had to lose a branch of government or a free press, I would choose to lose the branch of government and retain the free press?
He did say that.
Yeah, he did, and what do we do about, is there something that we, the public, can do about the fact that local and regional newspapers, which have been the lifeblood of political awareness and news and so much else in this country, are just dying out? They lose print advertising and then they go under.
Right. It's a real worry. I was the editor-in-chief of the Buffalo News, my hometown paper, and the largest news organization in upstate New York for 13 years. And I was proud to be the first woman to do that job. And, that paper is alive and kicking and owned by Warren Buffett, which is never a bad thing. But it has suffered just as all the regional newspapers have because of the decline of print advertising. And it's still making money, but if you look forward, you have to really worry. And this is something that's going on throughout the country. So if you can imagine a United States without news outlets like the Kansas City Star and the Cleveland Plain Dealer and the Buffalo News, they are the glue in many ways that hold our communities together,
of course,
and that keep local and state officials accountable. So while digital, smaller digital investigative outfits are cropping up, and that's great, I don't think they take the place of the newspapers, which have beat reporters and investigative reporters, and are able to really, cover the waterfront. There's no substitute for it. But what people can do is they can support and subscribe to their local papers, and they can hang in there with them and make sure that they are supporting them.
And understand their importance to that community, because there's nothing else like it. That's not something that the Post or the Times can do from Washington or New York.
It is not. It's not. And one of the really worrying things is that state capitol reporters are way down, something like 40% fewer than there were just a few years ago. And that's where so much accountability journalism needs to be done. So that's a real worry too.
Everybody's overlooked the state level much too much. The progressives have, which is why their state houses are controlled are so bright red, and in fact not just red, but right wing. And more is moving to the state level. So you're absolutely right. We're going long on this, and I don't care, because this is so important. This is the heart of the Women's Media Center too. Media, and making sure that the media is fair and full and representative and of the other half of our citizenry. So there's more I want to ask you, if I can. Just a few more moments.
Sure.
One thing was actually I wanted to offer you, because you have these wonderful one-liners like, call it a lie and scrutinize, don't normalize. And I wanted to offer you DARVO, D like deny, ARVO. DARVO is the invention of Dr. Jennifer Freed, who is a brilliant psychologist and the editor of the Journal of Trauma and Dissociation at the University of Oregon. She's a professor of psychology. And her specialty has been in sexual assault and then institutional denial of the sexual assault, whether it's a university or a local police department But this is expanded, and DARVO, which stands for Deny, Attack, and Reverse Victim and Offender, is now what the Trump White House has been doing. Deny is none of this ever took place. Attack is you're a disgusting human being for accusing me of this. And then reversed victim and offender is you're making up these allegations to hurt me. I'm really the offended party. Mm-hmm. And I must say, women have been finding DARVO extremely useful, and I think the press would too. But I did want to ask you, Margaret, one of the great fears is of, quote, going too far and then losing access. What do we say to journalists who get weak-kneed on that front?
Well, I think that the time for access journalism that wants to be close to the power centers and get scoops that way is is less important now than accountability journalism. And that's kind of the yin and the yang of journalism, access on the one end and accountability or watchdog journalism on the other. I think we need to let go of this idea of wanting to be close to the power centers and get our information that way, and instead emphasize digging and the watchdog role. So I would say if you aren't going to be in the White House briefing room or you're not going to get called on, you can still do your job and perhaps do it even better.
See, that's very spine-stiffening. By the way, a P.S. to that, nobody is more enamored of being covered than Donald Trump. So the fact that he might be covered by fewer sources, I think, is something in our favor. He wants access, and I don't think that the press should forget that.
I think that's true, although he does have Twitter.
He does have Twitter, but after a certain point, I mean, there's just so much that even he can do on Twitter. If you could wave a magic wand and change one major thing about journalism today in this era, what would it be, or is that an unfair question?
No, it's not an unfair question. I have a ready answer to it, and that is that I would somehow fund and make healthy local and regional newspapers and journalism. If I could fix that, I would. And I can't, and I don't know that it can be fixed, but that is something that I absolutely hate to see dwindle. Those who've seen the movie Spotlight about the Boston Globe know the power of local investigative work done at newspapers and how important it is. And as that shrinks, it's really going to hurt our country. So that's what I would change. So
maybe if all the people who immediately signed up to support the Washington Post and the New York Times because they hadn't subscribed in a while or ever, maybe if they also went and subscribed to their local paper, that would be a very strengthening and good thing for a free press in this country.
It would certainly help.
Yeah, I mean, remember the Atlanta Constitution when Trump referred to Atlanta as a hellhole of poverty, and they simply came out with a front page that said "wrong" and proved it. Well,
exactly.
I'm so personally grateful to you that you're on the case. Not only because you're a really, really good reporter with a really fine eye for what a free press should be and what we deserve in a free press, but also because you're a woman doing that job and doing it, of course, brilliantly. Thank you, Margaret, for everything you do, and thanks for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure and honor. Thank you.
It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be back directly with an expanded Surrealism Corner.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again just in time for the Surrealism Corner. Decisions. Do I start with Trump confiding to Bill O'Reilly on Fox that, quote, Obama really likes me? And when O'Reilly asks, how do you know? Trump responded, I can feel it. That's what I do in life. It's called, like, I understand. Period, close quote. Or do I start with the White House trying to impose a dress code for women, skirts and not pants, ideally, although plunging necklines favored for women by Trump were not specified. What was called for, though, was that, quote, women should dress like women. So get those lumberjackets out, sisters. Or how about Trump calling former General Flint of the NSC at 3 a.m. to ask, is a strong dollar better than a weak dollar, or the reverse? Flint didn't know, and he suggested Trump ask an economist. No, maybe it's better to begin by reporting that what really bugged Trump about Melissa McCarthy's hilarious portrayal of Press Secretary Sean Spicer on Saturday Night Live was not the devastatingly unflattering portrayal of Spicer and his lie-a-minute job defending Trump. No, apparently what really bothered Donald was that Spicer was lampooned by a woman. Or perhaps I can simply quote some items to save time. Quote, "Any negative polls are fake news, period," close quote. That's Donald who said that. He also said in remarks at MacDill Air Force Base when he was supposed to be talking about concerns of the military, quote, "We had a wonderful election, didn't we? And I saw those numbers and you liked me and I liked you. That's the way it worked." And the court eunuchs dutifully fall in line. Sean Spicer defended the fraudulent claim of illegal voting, singing out, "Trump believes what he believes." And when asked, "What does that mean for democracy?" Spicer replied, "It means that I've answered your question. Period." Close quote. Representative Lamar Smith of Texas, chair of the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, oh my God, he said it was, quote, "better to get your news directly from the president. In fact, it might be the only way to get the unvarnished truth." Period. The unvarnished truth being that Jupiter revolves around Neptune and the sun revolves around Trump. And there's this, quote, "Until the media understands how criticizing the president hurts the media's credibility, we are going to continue just calling it fake news. Sorry, that's the reality." That was Sebastian Gorka, former Breitbart editor, now deputy assistant to Trump. Of course, Kellyanne, the gift who keeps on taking, followed her earlier phrase, alternative facts, with her newest story of the underreported by media terrorist Bowling Green massacre, which was, of course, in fact, underreported because, I don't know, it never happened. She tried to back out of that one, saying she had misspoke and apologizing. Then it turned out she'd made the same misspeak on 3 different occasions over months to 3 different publications. She also said that the Obama administration banned Iraqi refugees from entering the U.S. for 6 months in 2011. A total lie. The shamelessness is of mammoth proportions. Now, please do understand that there were so many tweets in just this past week from the troll-in-chief that we don't have time for them all. Well, except maybe a passing reference to the so-called judge. But help is on the way. TrumpTwitterArchives.com is a treasure trove of his droppings since he joined in 2009, including many tweets that he's since deleted. Very useful. TrumpTwitterArchives.com. Moving on, and never forgetting that we are, after all, in the Surrealism Corner, there was also the video released by the Pentagon at Trump's instruction to prove that his deadly Yemen raid was successful, and the video turned out to be a decade old and available online. In reality, of course, the raid killed an American soldier and numerous Yemeni citizens, including children. As you know, not only do we now have Jefferson Beauregard Sessions as the Attorney General, so that he can embed bigotry and ignorance into the Justice Department, but we have Betsy DeVos confirmed as Secretary of Education, billionaire ignoramus herself. Then again, maybe someone totally ignorant of education is a good fit for the American public. Well, I'm being unfair, but right now I'm feeling a tad bitter. A new poll by Morning Consult illustrates the shallowness of public understanding of the ACA. 35% of respondents said either they thought Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act were different policies, or they didn't know that they were the same or different. This confusion was more pronounced among people aged 18 to 29 and those who earn less than $50,000, 2 groups likely to be specially affected by any repeal. When asked what would happen if Obamacare was repealed, even more people were dumbfounded. 45% did not know there was any discussion of the ACA being repealed. Respondents were also totally out to lunch as to potential consequences of substitute proposals being considered in Congress. For instance, only 61% of adults knew that many people would lose coverage through Medicaid or subsidies for private health insurance if the ACA was repealed. 16% said that such coverage and subsidies would not be affected by repeal, and 23% just shrugged and didn't know. Isn't it comforting to learn that Betsy DeVos will now be in charge of educating Americans? Then there's gun control. Remember that? Remember how Republican lawmakers and the National Rifle Association go into basic defensive crouches whenever a gun massacre happens? How they immediately blame crazy individuals and the inadequate mental health care system rather than examining how absurdly accessible firearms are? Well, that is, they do that, of course, unless the perpetrators are from a Middle Eastern country or might be non-Christian. Well, the Republican-controlled House voted last week to scrap an Obama policy that had been finalized in December, which would have added to the National Background Check database about 75,000 people who receive Social Security disability benefits due specifically to serious mental health problems. These are people who have conditions that make it impossible for them to work, who can't manage their own affairs, who have someone else receive benefits on their behalf. Federal law prohibits people who have been adjudicated as, quote, mental defective, unquote, or involuntarily committed to a mental institution. They're precluded from buying guns. But that's been almost impossible to enforce because government agencies don't always submit the names of people with mental health problems to the background check database for guns. The Obama policy was intended to address this flaw. Sure, most people with mental health problems never commit violence, but it's insane to give easy access to assault weapons to anyone, and that decidedly should include those with mental health problems. There's no logic behind this move, except that it will please the NRA because it means more gun sales. Surrealism rains down so hard and fast that entire scandals get lost, as does all-important follow-up, swept aside by the onrushing tide of new outrages. For instance, follow-up as in that statement on International Holocaust Remembrance Day that explicitly excluded mention of the Jews, the one that the White House said must have been a clerical error and that Spicer called nitpicking. Well, it was none of those things. Big surprise, the original statement by the State Department explicitly included Jewish victims, but the Trump White House deliberately cut that mention. Thanks a lot, Steve Bannon. The White House version of the statement did, however, garner applause from the major neo-Nazi website, The Daily Stormer. We've also learned in this past week that Trump takes various drugs with potential side effects that have an impact on mood and mental clarity. No, I don't mean they give him mental clarity when he obviously is lacking in it and needs some. I mean they intensified what are pretty plainly his already serious cognitive troubles. He takes finasteride to combat male pattern baldness. It's sold under the brand name Propecia, and it's the named culprit in almost 1,400 lawsuits filed against Merck, which markets the drug. The reported sexual side effects are serious. The constellation of symptoms may include sexual, physical, and psychological changes, a higher incidence of impotence, and ejaculatory disorders resulting in depression and anxiety. Oh, just what we need in a man with his finger on the nuclear trigger. And yet another explanation of why Melania wants to stay by herself in New York. Meanwhile, according to the high-level leaks from the White House, and my money is on Reince Priebus as the leaker in his desperate attempt to counter the growing influence of Steve Bannon. Anyway, those leaks not only tell us that senior staff is unable to find the light switches so that they can hold evening meetings by other than candlelight, but it also shows us the specter of Trump watching TV late into the night, eating junk food on a tray table, and then wandering the White House in a bathrobe. Nixon didn't do this sort of thing until a few weeks before he was forced to resign or be impeached. As usual, Trump seems ahead of the curve in his madness. But there's something just as frightening. The media has literally become the message. Trump doesn't actually read newspapers, and he never reads books, but he watches TV every chance he can get, even missing national security meetings and presidential intelligence briefings to do so. So instead of lobbying, You just get on O'Reilly or Morning Joe, and you've got Trump's attention. Pause for a second and think about that. No. Wait. Better take a Dramamine before you do. But rather than continue crashing into walls in this house of mirrors we all now inhabit, I will revert to my touching affection for trying to end on a positive note, albeit one that is also surreal. I've touched on this before, but now it is really taking off. Our country now has dozens of unofficial government resistance Twitter accounts. One is for NASA, another for the Environmental Protection Agency, and lots more for the National Park Service, the Peace Corps, the Customs Agency, and the nation's most important public health agency, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Meanwhile, federal employees, fearful that Trump's going to gut their agencies, are creating new email addresses, signing up for encrypted messaging apps, and looking for other protective ways to push back. In the Foreign Service, where 1,000 senior-level experts have quit in protest, and in the Labor Department and other government departments and agencies, employees are using cutting-edge technology together with old-fashioned private face-to-face meetings, their goal being to get the message across to each other while not violating rules covering workplace communications, because those can be monitored. Meanwhile, The Guardian broke the story that U.S. statisticians are sending out an alert. They're deeply concerned the Trump administration might suppress or manipulate public statistics that don't fit their narrative. Catherine Wallman, chief statistician of the U.S. from 1992 until just last month, told The Guardian, quote, "We should all be starting from the same numbers. Picking and choosing your numbers to suit your politics is not the way we are to be doing it." She, among other statisticians, believes that our number system, which consists of accurate, publicly available government data, is under threat. There is also a worry that the administration might stop collecting and publishing data at all on subjects such as abortion, racial inequality, and poverty. Wellman noted that the new administration does not understand the autonomy of the statistical agencies. The woman has a dry wit and a gift for understatement. Kenneth Pruitt, former director of the U.S. Census Bureau, noted, quote, "What people don't understand is that if you control the denominator, you control everything." Period. Close quote. All this beautiful bureaucratic rebellion is reassuring and encouraging and makes me want to shout, "Let's hear it for the bureaucrats!" But courageous and important as it is, the mere fact that these people have to do this is tragically surreal. Oh, and one last item about sex. Apparently, IUD prescriptions and procedures increased 19% in November and December of last year. No similar pattern was observed at the end of previous years. Analysts hazard no reasons why, but I think I have two reasons to offer. First, women being smart and already fearful about the possible loss of the ACA and Medicaid and about a tax on Planned Parenthood, they decided to go for an IUD while they still could and before the crazy right-wing guys make other contraceptives illegal. The other reason, and the two are not mutually exclusive, is that some women were so depressed after the loss of Hillary's presidency that they decided sex, and lots of it, was the best way to get their minds off feeling so wretched. Either way, they wanted to be protected. And either way, it's women being realistic in a surrealistic context. Now it's time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. Uncharted territory. That's a phrase we hear and read more and more as every day, well, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, Donald Trump and his gang brazenly overreach their power and violate laws, statutes, precedent, ethics, governmental standards, common decency, basic manners, and basic grammar. We suspected we had entered uncharted territory during the campaign, and we knew we were there when we won the election by a record number, but lost the presidency. Now, with Trump in the White House, it feels like we all may have taken up residence, hopefully temporary, in uncharted territory. Old maps sketching out unexplored regions, literally uncharted territory, had drawings of strange sea beasts and exotic great creatures gamboling in the waters, although it's a myth that the phrase, "Here be dragons," would always be written at the edges of what was then the known world. That's not surprising because Latin, not English, was the scholarly language. Still, only one map, the Lenox Globe, it was done around 1503, actually shows the words "Hic sunt dracones," "Here are dragons," written on the eastern coast of Asia. More recently, the phrase "Here there be dragons" was used for the unknown polar region labeled Terra Incognita of the asteroid Vesta. Well, by now you may think I've gone a little balmy, although regular listeners know that I sometimes seek refuge in the historical past or in amateur astrophysics to regain perspective, a survival necessity, particularly when trying to find one's way through uncharted territory. That's what, after all, the Standing Rock Sioux draw strength from: perspective, their own traditions, and the cosmos they and we float in, as they now have to regroup, refile lawsuits, and regird themselves to protest the Trump-resurrected construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Perspective is what Marissa Alexander sought when she said, "I didn't carry an umbrella when I first got home because I wanted to feel the raindrops on my skin." That was after she took off the ankle monitor, free to go play outside with her kids in Jacksonville, Florida, at age 36, after years locked in prison or confined to her house. In 2012, she was convicted of aggravated assault for having fired a warning shot at her husband, a chronic abuser who had threatened her life 9 days after she bore their daughter. Florida has a stand your ground law, which allows for the use of deadly force in self-defense. Well, that worked perfectly for White George Zimmerman, who was tried and cleared in 2012 after he fatally shot Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager. But that law didn't work for a woman, not an abused black woman who tried to plead stand your ground in her defense. She ended up with a 20-year prison sentence. Free Marissa Now, an alliance of activist neighbors, kept her case alive. In 2013, her conviction was overturned on appeal, and as she waited for a new trial, she negotiated a plea agreement allowing her to serve 3 years in prison and 2 years in house confinement. Now finally free, she's established a nonprofit called the Marissa Alexander Justice Project, which will provide advocacy in cases of domestic violence and promote policy reform. And she can walk in the rain. Sometimes I think children have an inborn sense of perspective. They organically understand fairness and the denial of it. Sydney Phillips from Kenilworth, New Jersey, had planned to spend this winter playing on the 7th grade girls' basketball team at St. Teresa's Catholic School, as she had done the year before. She was even named an all-star. But last fall, not enough of her female classmates showed interest, so St. Teresa's canceled their season. Sydney asked to play with the boys instead. The school said no. Her parents filed a lawsuit against the school and the Newark Archdiocese on their daughter's behalf, arguing that she shouldn't be held back just because she's a girl, and that she would not be taking any boy's spot on the team because it has a no-cut policy. Well, Superior Court Judge Donald Kessler ruled that the 12-year-old had no legal right to play. The parents appealed. Then, just this past week, the family received notice that Sydney and her younger sister, a 5th grade student, had been expelled from St. Teresa's by order of the Archdiocese. When the family showed up at school with both girls anyway, they were met by police officers and threatened with criminal trespass charges. They returned to court, where appellate court judge Amy O'Connor issued a temporary order requiring the school to reinstate the girls pending a hearing. In the middle of all this, Sydney said, "I just asked to play basketball and now I'm being expelled. It makes no sense." She's been playing basketball since preschool, plays on an intramural team, and has participated in co-ed basketball camps. Now she has support from the New York Liberty WNBA team, who invited her and her little sister to practice with them at Madison Square Garden, to show that she should have the same opportunities as boys. By the way, about the boys, Sydney mutters, "I'm better than them." Then there's Gregory Locke, a New York City subway rider who boarded a number 1 train and was met with the sight of all the windows and posters covered in anti-Semitic graffiti. "Jews belong in the oven. Heil Hitler. I voted for Trump. Trump will destroy the Jews." Swastikas were drawn in black marker on the doors. Locke, 27, a lawyer, exchanged horrified reactions with other passengers, including 36-year-old Jared Nied, a sous chef. Nied and other passengers began to wipe away the graffiti, their acts spontaneously recorded in pictures taken by Locke. Then Nied, who knew from experience that alcohol would erase markers, asked if anyone in the car had hand sanitizer. "I've never seen so many people simultaneously reach into bags and pockets looking for tissues and Purell," he said. Within 2 minutes, all the Nazi symbols were gone, and everyone in the car was smiling. By a day later, more than 500,000 people had reacted to the post on Facebook, which had been shared more than 354,000 times. More and more people are now carrying Purell and tissues. Small stories, humble stories, not earth-shakers. Like this. Some of you will call your senators and ask them to co-sponsor S-291 to modify requirements for membership in the National Security Council so that unqualified political strategists like Bannon have no voice in our national security. Some of you will call your representative and ask her or him to co-sponsor H.R. 804 to prevent political appointees from serving on the NSC. All of us should take note that the week of February 20 to 24 is the first district work period of the new Congress, meaning members of Congress will be back home holding public events and meeting constituents. If your representative doesn't have a town hall or other public events scheduled, call and tell them you expect them to. The purpose of such breaks is for members of Congress to hear directly from the people they represent, so if they're not willing to meet constituents, they're not doing their jobs. Remind them of that. Oh, and then you can reward yourself by checking out the utterly lovely, hilarious, moving documentary film, Speed Sisters, which made its U.S. theatrical premiere on February 10th on the heels of a festival tour and global release on Netflix. It's about a sisterhood of young Palestinian women who are, wait for it, amateur racing car drivers in the Gaza Strip. They have to fight off the occupying authority, soldiers, bombs, religious fundamentalists, families, and male racing car drivers while just trying to compete at a sport they love. Jessica Devaney, the filmmaker behind Speed Sisters, was a guest on this program a year ago, January, in episode 153. I really love this film. My point in all this is, I guess, that the Standing Rock Sioux and Marissa Alexander, that Sidney Phillips and Gregory Locke and Jared Nied, and the improbable, defiant, competitive love between the young Palestinian Speed Sisters and you and me are all somehow part of one emotional tsunami, whether we recognize that or not. In similar or different ways, all of us find ourselves in uncharted territory, where there be dragons. When I was young and green, I assumed we were the explorers. Now I know better. Now I understand. We are the dragons. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and don't forget to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes Worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my own website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.